So, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Regenerative Surrey. My name's Angela Swarbrick, and I'll be chairing the session this afternoon. We're so pleased to welcome such a diverse group of stakeholders, all with an interest and a shared passion for Surrey's natural environment. We've got representatives from farming and land management, ENGOs, local universities, local governments and statutory bodies such as Natural England and the Environment Agency. We have utility companies and also community groups. This representation is absolutely essential to the Regenerative Surrey approach, where we aim to achieve integrated, collaborative, systemic and transformative ways of working. To do this, all parts of the system need to be involved to solve the puzzle together. Regenerative Surrey is a programme of engagement. It's designed to knit together a local natural capital market in Surrey. The programme will start with a series of 3 webinars, which will feature representatives from farming, local government, and our local communities, who will share their current work, their visions and their targets for the future of Surrey's landscape. With this context, we'll then bring together all stakeholders into roundtable conversations and workshops to develop an aligned strategy and co-create projects which will regenerate Surrey's natural and farmed environments. In today's webinar, we're going to set out the aims for Regenerative Surrey, for the Regenerative Surrey programme, and give an overview of some of the campaigns in Surrey that have encouraged its launch. I'm sure you'll have lots of questions during the course of the webinar. Can I please encourage you to use the Q&A function on your screens, and we'll come to questions at the end where I hope our panellists will be able to deal with them expertly. I'm now going to hand over for the first of our talks and to hand over to Sarahjane.
Thank you very much indeed, Angela, and thank you for that introduction to what I hope will be a really exciting and collaborative approach across Surrey in terms of building the opportunities for the future. For those of you that haven't met me before, my name is Sarahjane Chimbwandira. I'm the Chief Executive of Surrey Wildlife Trust and the Chair of the Surrey Nature Partnership. And I've been working in Surrey now for over 20 years, looking at how we can develop a systemic approach to caring for our natural environment. And I'm really excited about the Regenerative Surrey opportunity to take that to the next level. And I always find it's really worth reminding us why this is a really good moment for us to do that, because we are in the midst of 4 different crises. And those of you who might have heard me say this before, I don't apologise for saying it again, because it's really important that we remember the urgency of coming together to take positive action to address these crises. But not to paint too black a picture on it, we actually do know what the solutions are. So if we come together, I'm a real believer that we can actually implement the solutions we need. We know in Surrey that we've lost over 1/3 of our species. They're either extinct or in decline. We also know that we're already experiencing the impacts of climate change with events such as wildfires on 2 of our national nature reserves last year, one of which required residents to be evacuated. We've also seen over the last 18 months how important the natural environment is to our well-being, but we recognise that for many, access to that green space, which is so important for all of us, is very varied, and there are many parts of the community which are not able to access green space in the way that we would like. And finally, we recognise that our resilience as a society, socially and economically, is very dependent on the health of our natural environment. But addressing these problems actually provides us with an opportunity to put something better back in place. And that's what we're trying to do with the Regenerative Surrey approach. We've been working on a natural capital approach now in Surrey for nearly 10 years. And what this does is it recognises the importance of our natural environment to provide us with a range of services, whether that's climate regulation or flood regulation, whether it's the provision of raw materials such as timber, or whether it's those cultural services, the ability to go for a walk and restore our well-being. All of these things are services which we've relied on for many years without necessarily recognising that they need to be maintained. And the natural capital approach is all about understanding that where we are at the moment is that stock, if you like, of our natural assets has been in decline for many years and continues to be in decline. And we rely for our resilience very heavily on the services that natural asset provides for us. So it's really important that we actually improve the assets, improve our natural environment, and also, very importantly, maintain it into the long term. And that's what the Natural Capital Investment Plan for Surrey, published in 2018, sets out to do, sets out a plan for how we do that. And nature-based solutions are a very good mechanism for delivering that. One of the most important aspects from my point of view is that we do this together. We have a lot of legislation coming through. We have a range of different people involved in developing policies and approaches. And all of these things have a place and a value in developing a restorative approach to Surrey. I think we should be ambitious, but I think we should be ambitious together to deliver the outcomes for nature that we're looking for. And what's really interesting is that many businesses, not only in the UK, but across the globe, have been working on this for a number of years because they recognise that not having regard to our nature actually affects our ability to do business. It affects the resilience of those organisations and it affects their ability to provide jobs and employ people. So it's really critical that we work together to address those challenges. Nature-based solutions are a really simple and cost-effective way of providing that resilience. Whether it's looking in the rural context and providing opportunities for natural flood management or carbon storage, or whether it's in the urban environment, providing rain gardens or living walls or living lampposts, these sorts of solutions are available to us now. And so collectively, we can put these solutions in place very rapidly. So what does this mean in terms of Surrey and our nature recovery network? You'll be familiar with the Environment Bill, which is due to come into legislation towards the end of the year, and the fact that local nature recovery strategies and nature recovery networks will be a key part of what the Environment Bill is looking to deliver. Again, we're very well placed in Surrey, having been preparing for this approach. And one of the examples that I often talk about is a Priest Hill case study in Epsom and Ewell Borough Council. Now, this happened many years ago now, about 10 years ago, where a piece of land that was abandoned playing fields had become a target for antisocial use for many years. It was not of value to the local community and it was not really delivering anything. Through a programme of work with the developer, the Wildlife Trust, the local community and the local authority, this is the outcome that was delivered: a development next door to an 80-acre nature reserve, which more than doubled the biodiversity value available, but also is now a massively important community asset with people using it every day for their walks, for their restorative well-being. But how do we make sure that that sort of outcome is delivered systemically, time and time again, rather than relying on a few people coming together just by luck? Well, one of the things that we've been developing most recently with our partners in the Coast Capital Local Enterprise Partnership is the start of a systemic approach to delivering those sorts of outcomes. What you can see here is one of our biodiversity opportunity areas situated on the east of the county, and a range of the services that this 1,400 hectare landscape provides for us. And what we've been able to do is start to understand that through a biodiversity net gain approach, we can deliver not only biodiversity value, but also additional social economic benefits in this area. And we've now taken this approach further in the North Downs and have actually mapped over 80 individual biodiversity net gain opportunities for landowners across that area. And what this allows us to do, looking at this particular opportunity just in Guildford Borough Council at the north of Pewley Downs Nature Reserve, is start to target where our restoration happens and start to target the opportunity around biodiversity net gain. And these will be key parts of the puzzle in our nature recovery network. So what does that mean in terms of nature? How is that going to benefit nature? Well, what you can see in front of you at the moment is a map showing the North Downs, and that's what it looks like at the moment in terms of how our species are able to move through the landscape. The green areas are areas where they're very permeable, species can move through, and the orange or red areas are real barriers to species being able to thrive in that area. If we deliver all of those 80+ projects identified in the North Downs, this is what that would look like in 2050. So you can really see how that improves the situation. So what's going to be happening next? We've been fortunate in being successful in securing funding through the Natural Environment Investment Readiness Fund. So we're going to continue our work to liaise with our local planning authorities, to encourage landowners through this Regenerative Surrey programme to understand the opportunities involved in delivering nature-based solutions. And that's something that will be ongoing over the coming months and years. And in this year, when we have not only COP26, but also COP15, where the G7 just a few weeks ago committed to a nature compact, and where just yesterday we saw the Green Finance Institute committing to supporting the development of local climate bonds, there is no better time for us to come together and realise the opportunity for Surrey. Thank you very much. What I'm going to do now is hand over to my colleague, Tim Hopkin, to take you through his Regenerative Surrey approach.
Great, thank you, Sarahjane, and hello, everybody. So I'm just gonna share my screen, give me a second. Okay, hopefully you can see that. So yeah, I just want to say, thank you very much for joining us today. It's obviously a real pleasure to be here. So yeah, my name is Tim Hopkin, and I am the founder and director of both Land Management 2.0, who are, we're bringing Regenerative Surrey to you today with Sarahjane, and also founder and director of the Land app, which I'll explain a little bit more about in a second. But just quickly, where did this kind of, these projects come from that I'm working on? I was brought up on a 90-acre family farm, which is just outside Godalming in Surrey. And about 15 years ago, I was really exploring how on earth do we as a business, or how do we stay in business? How do we make sure that we are able to maintain our business and justify keeping the farm? Obviously, the alternative to that is that we would have to sell it, and after 4 generations, the farm would have to be sold. So I was really keen to find a way of keeping the farm in business. I personally care a huge amount about nature and our benefit to society and what we're doing. And I knew on our little 90 acres where we have a triple SI that we should be doing more for nature. But the question I found was, what do we do? And really all of this came down to, how do we align our investments that we make in the farm to the landscape and the wider needs? And this was really the challenge that I was sort of stuck with, knowing that if I didn't find a solution, the likelihood was the farm was going to be sold. So at the time I was starting to study permaculture and regenerative agriculture, and it became really clear that actually there must be a solution. There must be a route and a roadmap to enable more regeneration, more contribution to the wider ecosystem, and enable the farm to grow and expand and actually, deliver on the objectives that we have. And I kind of felt that there would be an opportunity to create cohesively aligned landscapes. I was lucky enough to spend a bit of time in Africa and traveling around the world. And I thought actually doing something on our own holding wasn't enough. We needed to do more. We needed to connect landscapes and help everyone be working towards these same common endeavors. So how do we basically connect everyone, and how do we have the funding to deliver local and national objectives? This is what I was thinking. How can we enable that to be possible? So in 2015, I was lucky enough to be part of Ordnance Survey's first ever innovation hub. And this is where the idea of the Land app came from. I felt that there was the possibility of building an easy to use digital mapping platform for all land managers to firstly understand where you were, the context that you sat in, and then basically enable you to design projects and schemes. So since 2015, we've grown the company. We now have a team from the sector. So we've got a huge amount of people that are very well informed, here to support, help people get the most out of the platform. The software is free to use, so you can come in, you can start to understand more about your landscape, connect with neighbours and colleagues, and start to build these projects and plans. And we at the moment have 40% of farmland in England mapped on the software. So we're helping all of those different people work out how best to use their land and resources. And fundamentally, what does the software enable you to do? It enables you to build a baseline on top of which you can see the opportunities, whether it's bee lines or whatever it might be, the nature recovery networks, build land management plans, which is fundamental for elms, the natural capital market. Those plans can be aggregated, which I'll show you shortly, and then we can make funding available by working with our partners, such as Sarahjane in the Surrey Wildlife Trust. The projects can be delivered and then monitored in the software as well. So it's just keeping everyone cohesively connected in one single place. In the process of building the land app, it became very clear that there were a lot of incredible minds out there, a lot of people trying to solve these problems, but it was all very fragmented and scattered. So we set up Land Management 2.0, which is a not-for-profit community interest company. And really what it does, it connects communities, it allows knowledge exchange, so this knowledge exchange network, and allows us to start pushing at one. So we've run a series of different webinars, and essentially it's a collective approach to working out how we best work with the natural environment. And that's really where this Regenerative Surrey program came from, where we're all about aligning thinking, planning, acting, and delivering so we can push forward as one. Now that leads into a project that we're currently doing just outside Godalming. So this is called Thorncon Street, and we've been working with a group of 12 landowners within a 4,500 acre area, some of whom may be on the call today, on the webinar today. And what we've done with them is we've supported them to build a baseline of their holding, on top of which they've designed their ideal land management plan, what they would love to deliver, what they would love to contribute to nature. So both we help them prepare a baseline, which you can see on the left-hand side, and then their land management plans, what they would love to do. And then we've in the software enabled them to calculate the difference in biodiversity units and how much funding would be made available. And this is what we're working on with Sarahjane and the Surrey Wildlife Trust. So the idea is, how do we grow and scale this model? And a couple of weeks ago, we had Procter & Gamble come down, who are interested in investing in this project, but they could just be one of many corporates who want to invest in the enhancement of the natural environment. And this is the model that we want to scale throughout Surrey with your contribution, so that we can really start to turn Surrey into this regenerative county and start to demonstrate how, if we come together as a community, we can really deliver extraordinary outcomes on the ground. So there's lots more that we'll be sharing about this model as it continues to go forward through this program. So very simply, kind of coming back to what do I feel is the thing that's going to really enable us to generate this sort of regenerative Surrey approach and help us push together. So really very simply, it comes down to, we need to choose a direction together. This is about us coming together, choosing how we want to contribute to our natural environment, piloting different projects in different parts of the county so we can demonstrate what works and what doesn't, make sure we're learning what we're doing, and then we're aligning and going again. So we're continually improving the mechanisms that we're using to enhance nature. And this can really be a bottom up, so farmers, landowners, contributing what they want to put into this natural capital market, more hedges, more trees, more wildflower meadows, as well as top-down incentives. So maybe there are, maybe there are more opportunities for connectivity, as Sarahjane just shared about, that we could say, well, actually, if 5 farmers were to, build more hedgerows or shelter belts, that would create connectivity through that landscape. So we can have this sort of bottom-up and top-down approach where we have all stakeholders engaged. And really the whole point is we want to ensure that everyone is involved, the whole value chain, whether it's Network Rail, whether it's funders, investors, whether it's the farmers, farming groups, local communities, smallholders, local public, everyone engaged in this kind of this direction of travel that we're all going on together. So that's really what we're here to enable and the possibility we're looking to open up. And just coming to a bit of a close, really this comes, I guess, from the philosophy of thinking globally. As Sarahjane said, we've got these massive global crises that we're all walking into at the moment, whether we like it or not, but we have to act locally. And really, I think, you know, we do have all that we need to resolve the greatest global challenges that we all face together, but we just need to come together as one to work towards creating a prosperous planet for future generations. So that's really everything that underpins what we're trying to do and what we're here to enable. So if you want to connect to any of this, you're welcome to join the Regenerative Surrey online community, which you can access through the link there or the QR code. And if you'd like to sort of come into this sort of pipeline of projects and be involved and work with us in Surrey Wildlife Trust, you're welcome to create a free land app account, see your holding, interact with your field parcels, see the opportunities and be part of this conversation so we can work out new funding opportunities and funding streams in Surrey. Finally, if you're interested in connecting with me in any way, shape or form, and if it's more about the community and the knowledge exchange and networks, you're welcome to get in touch with me through my Land Management 2.0 email. If it's more about the software and working and creating projects potentially, you're welcome to get in contact with me through my Land app email. So that's really kind of it from my side. You know, we're here to help. We want to bring as many people into this conversation as we possibly can and help contribute to the most thriving natural environment and rural economy as we possibly can in Surrey. So that's it from me. Before I hand over to Carolyn, actually, there's one more thing that I need to do. And that is we have a question that we'd love to ask you is what would you like to get from Regenerative Surrey? What would you love to get from Regenerative Surrey? This program that we're undertaking, webinars, roundtables, workshops, what is it that you would love to get from this program? So hopefully the link has come through okay. Brilliant. A sense of what others are working on in Surrey's natural environment. So more sharing and ideas. Knowledge, investment, collaboration. I thought investment might come in. Successful investment, more collaboration, more scrub. So specifically things people want to see on the ground. Synchronization. So how do we work cohesively together? Knowledge exchange, enhanced environment, proper joined up strategies with landowners to create true nature corridors. Absolutely. So what else have we got popping in so I can pick it out? Networking, so people getting to know each other more. Orchards, a clear plan, cohesion, enhanced environment, transform woods, zero target, net zero targets, landscape scale nature recovery. Perfect. Okay, great. And collaboration and knowledge clearly coming out on top there. So thank you very much, everybody. I think I'm going to pause that. We'll try and send this out to everyone afterwards. But yeah, so that's everything from me. So thank you very much. And I'm going to hand you over to Carolyn, who can share a little bit more about what Surrey County Council are looking to do. Over to you, Carolyn.
Thanks very much, Tim. And I'll just share my screen. Well, that's the scariest bit over for me, actually getting my presentation on the screen. Just a quick introduction to me. I'm Carolyn Mckenzie. I'm the Director for Environment at Surrey County Council. So my area covers everything around climate change and carbon and biodiversity, but it also covers flood risk and flood risk management, waste and our countryside estate. So that's public rights of way, countryside management partnerships, everything to do with trees, and our own estate, which is quite large and actually includes a canal and various other things. So that's me in terms of a person, but in terms of why I'm here, when I first started to work at Surrey last year, one of the first things that I was given was a target which scared the life out of me, which was planting 1.6 million trees in Surrey, which is perhaps the most wooded county in the country, although Kent, where I'm from, it would dispute that. So planting 1.6 million trees in Surrey is quite a challenge. So I immediately tried to broaden that out to look at how we look at other environments, other habitats, other ways of capturing carbon and linking things up, which then brings you into the whole discussion around what people want out of the land. So you've got people wanting to plant trees, you've got people wanting to conserve biodiversity, you've got carbon sequestration, you've got renewables, you've got access and enjoyment. And all of a sudden you can see that we've got a lot of green space, a lot of natural capital and a lot of people that want to use it. So one of the things that I wanted to do was to make sure we looked at developing a framework, not a strategy, a framework that allowed us to link all those different aspects and all those different benefits and pots of money together to be able to get a cohesive approach. So that was how I came in to this. Just a quick plug for where that framework fits in. It's a key part of Surrey's climate change strategy. That was launched in May last year, and it commits Surrey as a county and all the local authorities within it, plus also Surrey County Council, to some really stretching targets around net zero, hitting net zero for Surrey County Council by 2030 and the county as a whole by 2050. So it has some really challenging targets within that, and we're currently developing the delivery plan for that. Obviously, a lot of what's made up in that delivery plan will come from things like making heating improvements and reducing emissions from transport and travel. But a key aspect will also be around how we interact with and how we manage our natural and green environment. And a much maligned phrase around offsetting, natural capital and offsetting, but it's something that I really want to challenge and see how we can combine what we need to do with carbon to really take a very, very positive approach to habitat creation and habitat and land protection and management there as well. So we get a meaningful approach to offsetting. So I'm sure you're all very well aware as you're on this call that natural capital is incredibly high on the agenda at the minute. I thought it would go down in priorities as a county council, but it's actually increased, and COVID has meant that that's increased even more. We've obviously got the obvious things of the government's 30 by 30, the carbon sequestration that we've talked about, but the Environment Bill coming forward is going to change things quite considerably in how we interact with and manage the natural environment. And biodiversity net gain is definitely something that us as a county and our district authorities that we very much partner with are trying to grapple and see how we address and linking that very positively to nature recovery networks. But there's a whole other driver about how we can use natural capital to benefit residents, to get those really positive outcomes around health and well-being, but also economy and training as well. So there's lots and lots of positive drivers and legislative drivers, and there's actually quite a lot of pots of money. But what the issue is with that is that there are lots of different pots of money, all with different rules and regulations, small pots, big pots, and they all link. And we have to try and find a way of both linking the drivers, linking what people want to do with the different pots of money and getting a really cohesive approach. And I noted on the word exercise that we did earlier on, that one of the key things that came out was about having a cohesive approach to developing an approach to land management and nature recovery. And that's very much what I would like to do and very passionate about, is linking those pots of money, linking what people want to do, and really kind of getting a positive approach. And I can't say that there hasn't been lots of activity, because there has been an awful lot of activity, and I'm new to Surrey, so I came from Kent and I'm new to Surrey, and there's such a lot of progress and a lot of really positive things on the ground. But is that enough for what we have to achieve, both in terms of nature recovery and from a climate change agenda? As I said, there's lots of money, there's lots of organisations, lots of activity, often going in the same direction, but quite often not. They're not going in the same direction, or slightly different. So the progress that we're making, is it maximised and is it enough? So what I want to move towards, and this is where you get the real privilege of seeing my what's in my head and my really bad drawing skills, but what I want to get to the way of working is that we bring all that together so that we have a combined joint approach that recognises differences, recognises the complexities, but helps us to move forward in a much more coordinated fashion and getting much better outcomes. So the framework that I'm proposing and developing with colleagues, which is in its early stages, is as I said, it's not a strategy, it's a framework. There are an awful lot of plans and action plans and strategies coming forward that look at things to do with the natural environment and natural capital. So this is about how do we hang those together to look at where we need to make sure there's no real conflict. So we don't want to plant trees on chalk downlands. We want to recognise where we've got really special areas of biodiversity that need to be completely protected and left alone. But we also need to link up where we can link up those strategies. So if we're developing natural flood risk management and looking at where we get flooded, how can we link that up with biodiversity, with carbon, with access and pathways and cycling? How can we link that all together when we can? So that's what it's about. It's about linking the different strategies, and those strategies I put on here are just a selection. There are lots more, and it's about how we link those together. So where are we in that process? Well, we're very much at the evidence base at the minute. We're looking at what we've got in terms of assets across Surrey, not just on public sector land, but also trying to engage and move forward with what's not on public sector land, to try and make an assessment of what those benefits and services are, and then start to layer that up, both with where we've got issues and problems, but where there's opportunities. So where we might have congestion issues or poor areas of air quality, or where we might have areas where there's not much green space and we can create more. So it's really making that strategy link up and really overlaying those opportunities and challenges so we can see where the sweet stroke hotspots are. And then moving later to get a pipeline of projects or bringing projects together to aggregate projects so we can start to use that to be in a position when government comes out with pots of money that sometimes don't have very long lead-in times, or when there's other avenues of opportunity, we've got those projects ready to invest in. That's just to give you, this slide's just to give you an idea of the type of work that's ongoing, the type of research that we've already and data that is already ongoing and we're collecting and bringing together. Some of it Sarahjane's referred to. They did some natural capital accounting a couple of years ago. We've now taken that and taken it from just one side of the county to covering the whole of the county, but also urban biodiversity opportunity areas, as well as identifying where we can plant trees and bringing those different bits of work together, as well as working with our district colleagues with what they're doing at a local level and feeding that in as well. So we've got a really, really comprehensive database that's forever improving as we go forward. So just to give you an idea of some of the information that we're getting. So this is from a piece of work that's being done by Bureau Happold for us in partnership with Tree Economics, and I always get that name wrong, but it's looking at a number of different data sets. This is where we can plant trees on public sector land. The dark areas is where the best opportunity is. As it's lighter, it's obviously not. And to the side, you can see the other data sets that's being brought into this. This is an interesting map. It's another view of natural capital. It's that view of how we use our open spaces to generate renewables, which we can't ignore. On the right-hand side is the potential in Surrey for renewable energy generation, which is really quite good. On the left-hand side, with lots of red, is where we've got constraints. So we have to be realistic about what we can put in such a beautiful county as Surrey, but there's lots of opportunity. And these are some of the key areas we're looking at to see where we can generate renewables on public sector land. And lastly, the last bit of work in this current bit of work is around, as I said, the natural capital accounting. So really looking at where those wider benefits are. And a lot of those wider benefits benefit the public. So and wider society. So how do we access those benefits? So just to round up, next steps for us is to continue the engagement around this. We've done work with our local district colleagues. We've done work with the Wildlife Trust, and we're starting to go out and talk to a lot more people to have an approach where we as those people working in the countryside, working in natural environment, and that's not just in the countryside, that's in urban areas as well. How do we come together as organisations and really have a one Surrey countryside approach. So linking up, recognising differences, recognising different priorities, but having a real combined approach to get the best out of our natural capital. So that's where we're at the moment. So if you're interested, then please do get in touch, and we'll be making contact with as many people as possible to try and link up. And I'm going to hand back now, as soon as I can work out how to stop sharing, I'm going to hand back to Angela.
Thank you, Carolyn. Yeah, I think you've stopped sharing, so that's good. And also thank you to Tim and Sarahjane as well for their contribution. Can I remind participants, if you've got any questions, please do feed them into the Q&A. A number of you have already fed questions in, so we've got the opportunity now to put some of those questions to our panel. So let's kick off with that. And the first question we have is from Molly Biddell. And the question is, how are the planning authorities in Surrey preparing their teams and resources to be able to implement biodiversity net gain when the Environment Bill passes Parliament? Perhaps I can initially direct that one to Carolyn, and other members of the panel can contribute as they wish.
Yeah, I think it's varying across the piece, and Sarahjane might want to come in on this as well, because I know she's been working with some of our district colleagues. But I think the first thing we're trying to do, and especially I've just been to a number of planning forums to talk through the land use management framework, is very much about that evidence base, so we can really see what we've got in Surrey, so that when we do get to really implementing biodiversity net gain, that we know where the really good bits of land are, so that we can have really positive outcomes, rather than it just being a kind of knee-jerk reaction to it, and hopefully for most of that investment to be going into Surrey and not outside of Surrey. So I think that's where we're gearing up, is very much around getting the evidence base in place, and then training up both officers and members, our politicians, to understand what it actually means. And Sarahjane might want to add to that because of some of the work we're doing collectively together.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Carolyn. I think really good question, Molly. In many ways, once the Environment Bill is passed, there will of course be a 2-year period for local planning authorities to do exactly what you're suggesting, which is to make sure they have the right capacity, the right skill sets in order to be able to deliver biodiversity net gain in an appropriate way. The way I tend to look at this at the moment is, in Surrey, because we've been thinking about this for a little while, actually it's all about getting our preparation in place. As Surrey Wildlife Trust, we're regularly talking with our local planning authority colleagues about how can we support them in developing the capacity that they need. And I think that local authorities have a very interesting role in the biodiversity net gain discussion, both as local planning authorities, but also as major landowners across the county. So the opportunity for local planning authorities and local authorities in general is both looking at how they're going to discharge their responsibilities from a statutory perspective, but also looking at the opportunity they have around their own land holdings to deliver biodiversity net gain outcomes.
Thanks, Sarahjane, and thank you, Carolyn. Some more questions are coming through, so let's move on to the next one. This one is from Nicholas Foxton, and his question is, does Surrey really need trees planting? They're very successful at planting themselves. Perhaps a more sensible approach is to cherish the veteran trees that already exist in Surrey and not waste money on planting whips in plastic that will be lucky to survive a year. Perhaps Sarahjane, can I start with you?
Yeah, very happy to do so. I mean, it's one of those interesting anomalies where normally in most places in the country planting trees is obviously welcome with open arms, and in Surrey it's something where we probably require a little bit more balance to the approach. So I think the first thing I would say is I would be really pleased to see that in the England Tree Strategy in early sort of consultation drafts, there was a very strong emphasis on creating or planting woodlands, and actually that emphasis was softened and recognised the role of natural regeneration in woodlands. So I think that was very much welcomed, and something that we all need to think about is what are the opportunities for natural regeneration, rather than always feeling that we have to sort of plant lots of woodlands. I think the other thing that we've been really keen in this discussion is to emphasise that it's not just about creating new woodlands, it's also about hedgerow opportunities. It's also about thinking about things like copses and shores, for example, where they become linear connecting features within the landscape, rather than just perhaps thinking about a woodland as such. But there are also parts of the county where we're quite poor in terms of our woodland coverage. So I think there are opportunities to do both. It's just making sure that we get that balance right.
Thanks, Sarahjane.
Angela, would you mind if I was just going to come in on that, because trees is probably one of the biggest things that I get written to about, and it is that incredibly fine balance about treasuring what we've already got, which we've got some really good habitat there, but there is a real ask from lots of members of the public to plant more. So we do get that ask on a regular basis. So it is about getting the right approach as to whether we let, when we take down trees from ash dieback, because we've got huge issues around ash dieback, we obviously want to replenish that. And it's how do we do that? Do we do that through natural regeneration, or do we plant rips? And you've got two sides of the coin. Some people want to see trees planted straight away. Some people want the natural regeneration. So it is a real balance. But just to reassure, we have a tree strategy now in Surrey County Council, and we're working on an action plan around the tree planting, but we will be doing exactly what Sarahjane said. So we'll be looking at hedgerows as well, we'll be looking at other habitats, and we'll be really trying to find a balanced approach to how we do this and how we protect as much as possible the trees that we've already got.
Thanks, Carolyn. And I see in the Q&A that Anthony Mills has added some comments as well, I think sort of supporting some of the that have already been made. So thank you for that. We'll move on to the next question, and that's from Chris Stanton. And his question is, noting the agricultural strategy featured within Carolyn's land management framework, that was the first real reference I saw to food production. While Surrey is not a breadbasket in the same way as, say, East Anglia, what are the panellists' views on the food production, including improved diet, as reported in the government, in the report to government by Henry Dimbleby's committee? As a farmer, can I go to Tim first, please, to respond to that one?
I was going to say, yeah, Chris, I think it's such a great question, because food is so often left out of this whole natural capital conversation. And of course, it's what we all need to survive. And if we don't produce any food, we're in trouble. I think here on the farm, honestly, I think we would still want 80–90% of the land in essentially food production. And I think for us, I see the bulk of our revenue coming from that. I think the piece that I'm conscious of, or the value of creating still this kind of community, this regenerative Surrey, is the reason we called it Regenerative Surrey rather than Natural Capital Surrey is because we think the whole of this land use needs to be regenerated, including food production, and the methodology that's used to grow the food. You know, the regenerative agriculture approach really focuses on soil, and I think that's what we want to stimulate. So I would say, in terms of your point, Chris, yeah, absolutely. I think if we emphasize food production and relocalizing the food supply chain, maybe creating more transparency as to where the food is coming from in Surrey, to give farmers a little bit more of a premium than just selling into the commodity market, we can start to stimulate a bit more of a food generating culture than we have at the moment. And I think that's going to be incredibly exciting. That still is very much complemented by our objective of creating more connectivity, connecting our farm to other farms to help biodiversity, which will also help food production. So I would totally agree. I think food is a hugely valuable component of this conversation, and certainly something we want to stimulate. So with regenerative, sorry. So yeah, great question.
Thanks very much, Tim. Shall we move on to the next question? And this is around flood management. So the question is, regarding flood management and increasing biodiversity, there are now ample studies suggesting that rewilding projects to reintroduce ecosystem engineers, such as beaver, are both effective and popular with the public, starved of contact with these charismatic mammals. Nature deficit disorder, as it's now termed. Any one of the panelists want to comment on Nicholas's point?
Yeah, I'm really happy to take that as a start of 10, Angela. Really interesting, actually. I think in a county like Surrey, which is quite a small county geographically, so we want to make a lot of use of the land that we have, a lot of diverse uses of the land that we have. It's quite interesting to think about how does the rewilding discussion come into a county like this, but actually it's got a lot of different character. The west of the county with the big heathlands, we already have one of the rewilding projects in the country there on the MOD land, Purbright Ranges, where the Wildlife Trust carried out a red deer reintroduction project a number of years ago, and that's a quite a well recognised example of how rewilding can work in a county like Surrey. But certainly from the Wildlife Trust perspective, thinking about the ecosystem approach, the much larger scale repair of ecosystem integrity is really core to what we're now looking at. How do we achieve that? And bringing in species such as beavers, water voles, whatever it might be, to help manage the landscape in a more natural way is certainly something that we should have an ambition around. And I think the rewilding movement is a very accessible one to people, and so we've seen lots of additions. For example, there's a rewilding avenues project, which is all about how do people turn their front gardens into opportunities for wildlife to move through those urban areas. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for us all to work together about those much more natural approaches to managing our ecosystems.
Thank you, Sarahjane. The questions are coming through thick and fast now, so you do need to bear with me as I try and keep on top of them all. But the next one is coming in from Jeremy Jones, and his question is that saying, I was really very surprised at the tree species choice in the SCC Tree Strategy 2020, not very native and no oaks. Oak processionary moth will be a big problem in future years, but there will be large land holdings where there is little public access. Carolyn, perhaps that's one for you to respond to initially.
Yes, we are certainly re-looking at the strategy that was put there, but the whole emphasis will be on, as much as possible, on native trees, and there's a real drive towards the right tree in the right place. So I will definitely take that back to my woodland officer, because that is definitely something that we are looking at, is to wherever possible to be looking at native trees rather than non-native trees.
Thank you. Okay. Sarahjane or Tim, any further comments on that one?
I mean, no, not really, other than to emphasize the point we made earlier, which it is about natural regeneration as much as it is about planting. So it's making sure that we put the right solutions in place in the in the right location, really.
Yeah, great. Okay, moving on to the next question from Gareth Mathers. He asks, I wonder if we need biodiversity officers within the boroughs. Oh, hang on a minute, my screen's moving around. I've lost the question. Here we are. Yeah, so I wonder if we need biodiversity officers within the boroughs to comment on planning permissions and ensure BNG is implemented. Will there be funding to provide this in-house expertise within Surrey Borough Councils? Sorry, Carolyn, I think I'm directing this one back to you again.
Funding, I think there's whether there's funding, that's a difficult question, because the pressure on most of our district councils is quite high at the minute in terms of resources and officer resources. But what we are looking at is joining up our resources, so we can look at treating this as a total number of local authorities moving forwards to make sure we have the right resource in place. We've also just put in a collective bid around woodland and woodland management and tree planting through the Treescapes Fund that the government have. But it will be a challenge, because planting trees and habitat creation does need resource, and it's not just resource for creating that habitat, it's about how you manage it moving forwards, and that's going to have to be addressed, because we currently don't have sufficient resource to do that, I would say, at the scale that it needs to be done. So a different approach needs to be taken.
Yeah, thank you, Carolyn. Okay, next question that's come through is from Mark Franklin, and his question is: will the scheme consider funding enhanced protection, buffering, restoration of existing high quality areas, i.e. pause, species-rich grasslands, etc.? Also, what are the considerations for introducing agroforestry schemes? I think that sounds like one for Sarahjane and Tim. Perhaps Sarahjane first.
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately what this is this approach about is securing greater investment across the board. We all acknowledge that funding is going to be constrained probably for some years to come as we move forward out of the COVID pandemic and think about what does the future look like. So all of this approach is about seeking funding and investment from different areas, bringing it together, and as Carolyn said, you know, making our money work for us more effectively in delivering outcomes for the natural environment. And one of the things, just picking up on the previous point about biodiversity officers within districts and boroughs and across local authorities, there is a very strong link in what we're saying here about a regenerative approach in Surrey to the skills and the jobs that will be created if we secure the investment. And we are going to need to invest in upskilling people at all levels across the education system if we're going to be able to fill those jobs in the next 5 to 10 years. So I think that there's a very nice match between that economic drive around job creation and what we're trying to achieve with investment in natural environment.
Thanks, Sarahjane. Tim, did you want to add anything?
No, I think everything Sarahjane said is exactly right. I think the more that we can create these markets, let's call it, and it become easier for landowners to say what they're interested in doing and for funding opportunities to become available, it will naturally create that pool of capital that allows us to upskill more people to be a part of that process. And there's a lot that needs to be done. Environmental impact assessments need to be done before the funding happens, verification of the scheme design, monitoring ongoingly. So the more that we can create this market, the more money is going to float around the whole system. And I think for what we're all needing to achieve for nature, yeah, in Surrey, yes, in the UK, but also globally, we need more people part of this, this progression that we're going on. And these markets that we're creating can only be possible if we've got the people who are involved. So I think it's a bit chicken and egg, in that we kind of need to have the systems to create the money, but once the money's in, then the people on the ground will be able to facilitate more money coming in. And I think that's what Sarahjane, you know, what we're trying to do is try and stimulate this market, because we feel that once it gets going, there's a lot of ESG, environmental social governance money coming available from corporates. And the meeting that we had with Procter & Gamble, it's becoming very clear that that's a very high on their corporate agenda. The board want to know, where do they sit with the environment? And so I think there's going to be billions of pounds coming available. We need the systems in place on the ground to enable that to be spent properly. And that's really what we're trying to do together. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Thanks, Tim. Thank you. And then we've got a question from Edward Jackson, which is for you, Tim. Edwards has joined us from Suffolk, and he says, Tim, do you have any plans to share the regenerative programmes with other counties and local authorities?
We originally thought that let's do something in Surrey, and then within about a week of Sarahjane and I configuring the design of what it would look like, we had about 3 or 4 other counties say, God, we'd love to stimulate the market in our county. What can we do? And so I think it's probably quite inevitable that the model will spread. Whether we say, here's the framework, use it, whether we facilitate it, which is kind of what we're doing now. And I think we would love to, basically. I think it's very hard to visualize the natural capital market coming into existence unless at a county level there's governance and administration of that, so that there's, you know, the right priorities are being invested in. So it does require a county level approach. And so yeah, we'd be delighted if we could replicate the model or teach people how to do. So yes, is basically the answer. If we can help, we will.
Great, thank you. Good. I am conscious of time. Maybe we can just have one final question and then I can bring the webinar to a close. The final question is around natural capital language, and the question is whether using the natural capital language, is it appropriate because it's thought it may alienate local communities? Perhaps Sarahjane, you might want to comment on that.
Yeah, really happy to. As far as I'm concerned, using the words natural capital are really just a tool in terms of the audience that I'm communicating with. So I will vary the way I describe what we're trying to achieve depending on who it is that I'm communicating with. But one of the reasons why natural capital has been valuable over the last 10 years is because prior to that, the natural environment was often invisible in decision making. So for me, this is not about saying the natural environment is worth X billion pounds a year. That's never something that I say. It's about recognizing that it has a value and therefore should be taken into account by our decision makers. So it's about raising the profile and the importance of the natural environment, not necessarily about giving a definitive value for any aspect of the natural environment.
Thanks, Sarahjane. I'm conscious that there may have been some questions or comments that we've not quite had chance to discuss properly. What we will do after the webinar is just check through those, and any that we've not answered, we'll endeavour to answer and get those responses out, perhaps as part of the forum. I would like to take this opportunity to thank everybody for attending this webinar. It's been really interesting. I hope you've all found it interesting and that it's stimulated lots of ideas. Obviously, this is the first of 3 webinars, so I hope you'll be signing on for future webinars as well. The one next week, we're going to be hearing from a great set of representatives from the farming sector who are going to be outlining some of the opportunities coming up for farmers and land managers in Surrey. The link to register to that session, I think, has just been put through into the chat function, so you'll be able to pick that link up. And also, we'd like you to join the Regenerative Surrey online community, where you're very welcome to have your say on the webinar and outline what you'd like to get out of Regenerative Surrey. There's a meet and greet meeting with Regenerative Surrey online next Tuesday lunchtime. And again, I think the link for that is being posted in the chat box. I think joining the community is an opportunity for you to expand your ability to take action in Surrey by connecting with other participants in the Regenerative Surrey programme. And also it will be an opportunity to understand how the online community will work. Again, I think we've just pasted those links through. So I am going to draw the webinar to a close, but I'd like to thank our 3 panellists for their fascinating insights, and also to thank all the participants for your questions and comments that have made it a really interesting session. So thank you and good afternoon.